everybody. Welcome to Waitangi. Haven't we put on a great day for you, and we're in for a fantastic weekend. We have our first speaker of the evening, and I'd like to introduce MikeSilverman. Now, Mike is a chartered accountant. He's been involved in communication throughout his life. Now, speaking of communication, I hope all your cell phones are turned off. If not, turn off. But he's been involved in corporate television and had a wonderful, illustrious career, notably being contracted to the Walt Disney Company and Richard Branson's The Virgin Group in the UK, USA and in Australasia. Currently, Mike is a corporate uncle, which is an interesting title, isn't it? Working with an Icelandic company exporting glacial water to refugee camps worldwide. Mike has been a Toastmasters member in the UK, Ireland and New Zealand, receiving accolades for his distinguished contribution. The title of his speech tonight is Success is Magical. Sort of ties in with Walt Disney, doesn't it? And the acronym MAGICAL stands for Members Achieving Growth in Communication and Leadership. Mike will be entertaining and informing us in an interactive speech tonight about the development of effective communication skills and weaving his message through his many life experiences. Please welcome Mike to the stage.
Kia ora. Kia ora. You know how expressive Italian people are with their gestures? Well, I was in Italy once, in Rome, and I was hopelessly lost. And then I saw a little old lady walking down the road, burdened with her shopping bag, just like this. So I went up to her, I said, "Scusi signora, dove vi venite per favore?" Impressed with my Italian? She wasn't. With an inconvenient sigh, she said, "Un momento, signor." Now, did I understand exactly what she said? Yes, I did. And could there be any misunderstanding about her meaning? No, there couldn't. And are you confused with my gestures? Yes, you are. What I'm showing you here is the power of gestures. On their own, they can be perfectly explicit. But if you put them together with words without synchronicity, they have the power to confuse and mislead. And they may also be misinterpreted. There's an ancient story, and it comes from the time of the Spanish Inquisition. It tells of a band of Romany gypsies who wanted to make a permanent home outside the walls of a great city, but the king was not best pleased, for they were not of the true faith. So he banished them from his land. Well, the gypsies appealed. Now, the king was a fair man. So he said, "Well, very well, but they must earn the right to stay. I will challenge them to a debate with my archbishop. If they win, they may stay. If they lose, they must go." The gypsy elders agreed, but the king was also a cruel man, and he imposed 3 conditions. The debate must take place without speaking. The representatives of the gypsies must be a young boy, and the archbishop alone would decide who won and who lost. So on the appointed day, the boy appeared at court before the king and all the courtiers, and up stood the imposing figure of the archbishop, who began thus. The boy replied, the archbishop went, and the boy responded. The archbishop took out a flagon of wine and a wafer, and the boy produced an apple. The archbishop thought for a moment, then he turned to the king and said, "I'm defeated. The boy has won. The gypsies must stay. The boy was dismissed. The courtiers all ran to the king, who turned angrily to the archbishop and said, "What happened? What was said? How did you lose?" And the archbishop said, "I began by saying we believe in the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost." And the boy replied, "Yes, and there is but one God, whom we all share." I said, "God is all around us." And he said, "Yes, and he is here right now by my side." I showed him the wine and the wafer to demonstrate how we do penance for our sins. And he showed me the apple to remind me of the original sin. I knew then that this boy had an answer for everything, and I could not win. Meanwhile, the boy went back to the gypsy camp and was taken straight to the elders. Delighted with the news, they still wanted to know what happened. So the boy said, "Well, this archbishop stood up and said, 'I'll give you 3 days to get out.'" And I said, "Not one of us is leaving." He said, "If you don't go, the king will send his troops and clear you from his land." And I said, "We're staying right here." I said, "What happened next?" He said, "I don't know. He took out his lunch, so I took out mine." So perhaps gestures on their own are not quite so unequivocal. Clearly, to be understood, we need to have words and gestures, and we need them in harmony. Talking about harmony, I'd like to start getting all of you involved now. So what I'd like you to do is to form up into groups of 6, if you wouldn't mind. Just take a chair and make, if you can, a little semicircle facing me. Just do 6 people. Okay? If you could do it today, because I've got a meeting on Wednesday.
Two make it 7. Hope you don't mind. I know we've got a 4.
Two needed.
Is any left over? Is any left over? No more than 7 in a group, please. Try and leave a little bit of space between the groups, because you'll need a little bit of space.
That makes 2 of us.
6 of us.
Why would you come up rows? Nice rows of chairs. I want you
Hey, could you move your group back a bit? No, you're fine. But Pate, you need to move your group back a little bit, just to give yourself some room. Okay? You guys here, just behind you guys, if you could move back a little bit, because you're going to need a bit of room. Just move back a bit, if you can. We all got about 6. Anybody? Not too many more than 6. Thank you. Thank you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, with some more stories from me and some more help from you, this evening we're looking at the 4 key success factors that I think make for good communication. And for us in Toastmasters, good communication means success, and success is sort of magical. Now, in our first 2 stories, we looked at the power of gestures. What I'd like to talk about now is impact. But before we do that, let's start our experiment. Now, the person who is on the far left end of each group, would you put your hands up, please? Far left hand, so as I'm looking at, or far right hand as you're looking at me, sorry. I'm sorry. Far right hand as you look at me. Okay? Are you all Toastmasters? Are you all Toastmasters? Good. Thank you. You've just volunteered. You're volunteer number 1.
Thank you, Kate.
And the task for volunteer number 1, sweet, you need to start working. I'm going to ask you in a moment to stand up in front of your group, face your group, and clasp your hands behind your back. That's so you can't use any gestures. And then I'm going to ask you to just talk to your group for 1 minute about your favourite hobby. Now, sorry, Karen is going to time us. You won't be able to see the lights, so after a minute you're going to hear this. So when you hear that, just stop and take a seat. So you ready? So if you'd like to just stand in front of your groups, clasp your hand behind your back, talk for 1 minute on your favourite hobby. Thank you.
My favourite hobby is ice skating. It's very difficult because you have to balance on one leg. There are many moves you can do on ice skates. For example, the spiral. I don't take my arms back, not with my hands. You can jump. You can go from side to side to side.
You're using gestures. You're cheating. You're cheating.
Jump with it. That's fine. It's very good for flexibility. Except when you fall on the floor. Then you've got to actually get yourself up. It's very difficult when you're on skates. Because you try to get up, you slip, and you're back on the floor again. Eventually somebody might give you a hand up. You get back up. I'm old, I get more bruises and injuries and things like that. But you keep trying, and I'll trick to a good jump ahead. Self-balanced, over. Oh, nice.
Thank you. Now, in our first 2 stories, as I said, we looked at the power of gestures. Now I want to look at impact. The impact that we have on our audience and how that can differ from person to person. If you have 3 people in an audience, there's a good chance that you'll get 3 different interpretations of the same words. And that's something that speakers must be aware of. Let me illustrate it with a very old story that comes from Hungary. There was a rumour going around the forest that the bear had a death list. So the fox came to the bear and said, "Is it true you've got a death list?" And the bear said, "Yes." He said, "Am I on it?" And the bear said, "Yes, you are." He said, "Can I say goodbye to my loved ones before you kill me?" And the bear said, "Yes, but come straight back." So the fox came back and the bear killed him. Then the wolf came to the bear and said, "There's a rumour that you have a death list. Is that correct?" And the bear said, "Yes." The wolf said, "Am I on it?" And the bear said, "Yes." He said, "May I make my goodbyes first?" And the bear said, "Yes, but hurry straight back." The wolf went away, made his goodbyes, came back, and the bear killed him. Then the rabbit came to the bear and said, "Hey, Mr. Bear, I hear you got a death list." "Yep." "Am I on it?" "Yep." "Would you take me off it?" "Sure, no problem." So the implicit message of that silly story is for speakers, keep it simple. For speakers and listeners, the explicit message is never ignore the obvious. Let's get back to our experiments. The turn of volunteer number 2. Now, heeding my own advice, never ignore the obvious, volunteer number 2 is sitting to the immediate left of volunteer number 1. Now, I don't mean to insult you, because I can see that you're an intelligent audience, but you'd be amazed how many times you'll get people sitting there, well, who does he want to be number 2? So, volunteer number 2, your task is to stand up in front of your group without speaking, just with gestures and just for 20 seconds. Just show your group, like that lady did there. Oh, she cheated.
I didn't use my hands.
That's true. I should have said. My fault. Just show your group with gestures for 20 seconds your favourite hobby.
So that must be you. Oh no, you do it now. Yeah, when you were facing that way.
No, it's a movable feast.
It's my go. I need to describe my favourite hobby without using any words.
Yes. If it's meditation, you can just sit there.
Thank you. Wasn't an intelligence test. I can see a wide and eclectic group of hobbies going on here. So, I joined Toastmasters back in 1988 here in New Zealand at the Flying Start Toastmasters Club. And of all the things I've learned in my 26 years in this marvellous organisation, the single most important lesson of all is to know your audience. It's a lesson I learned very early on in my Toastmasters career. Back in 88, 89, most of you weren't even born then. Does anybody remember the scandal going on around Peter Plumley Walker? Does anybody remember that? There was a trial, a murder trial of a young prostitute and her boyfriend over the murder of Mr. Peter Plumley Walker in scandalous circumstances. I was invited to speak after the charter dinner of a new club on the North Shore. So I did a humorous speech called The True Life Story of Peter Plumley Walker. And in all modesty, it was very funny. I got a lot of laughs. The speech went down a storm. 1 week later, I gave exactly the same speech to a Toastmasters club in Auckland, and it died a death. It bombed completely. And at the end, a bloke came up to me and said that he was Peter Plumley Walker's cousin and he was going to sue me for defamation. It's true. So, know your audience. And if you don't know your audience, research it and prepare accordingly. And here's what happens if you don't. I was once invited to give a talk to a large audience in Moscow. So I thought it'd be a nice idea to do the speech in Russian rather than English. So I took a crash Russian speaking course, I think 2 weeks. And although I didn't have time to learn how to translate from Russian into English or vice versa, after 2 weeks I could look at any Russian words and speak them quite fluently. So I wrote a speech, had it translated into Russian, and there I stood in front of 500 assorted Soviets, relaxed, confident, and eager to show off my proficiency in their native tongue. And just as I was about to start, a thought occurred to me. I remembered my host had said, "You must have a formal opening. The Russians will be offended without it." A wave of panic came over me as I looked out over the heads of the expectant audience. And then my eyes came to rest on the toilets at the back of the hall. And there was my inspiration, because written above the 2 toilet doors in bold acrylic letters were the words "Bourgeois et Tudatiecki." Obviously, ladies and gentlemen. Delighted with my discovery, I launched into my speech with a resounding "Dorogai Bourgeois Tudatiecki," and then proceeded to give what, if I say so myself, was an excellent talk in flawless Russian. At the cocktail party that evening, I asked my host how my speech had been received. He said, "Very well. Your Russian is excellent, but we were confused with your opening remarks." I just said, "Dear ladies and gentlemen." He said, "No. You said, dear urinals and water closets." So, volunteer number 3, your turn. Now, your job is to speak for 1 minute using words and gestures, as you are used to. Hands, legs, falling on the floor, like that lady, whatever. You can exaggerate your gestures. By the way, you can be talking about golf or tennis or knitting or full contact origami, whatever you like. But speak for a minute, if you would. Number 3, with words and gestures about your favourite hobby. Go ahead.
Yeah,
And my body just does not come out. My hobby not use an
Well done, thank you. Now, back in 1997-98, I had the privilege of being the district governor for District 71, which was the UK and Ireland. And it's now split into 2 districts, 71 and 91. And that's when my theme for the year was "Success is Magical," members achieving growth in communication and leadership. Now, in District 71, you spend 4 years on the district executive. So those 4 years and the years before and after it gave me the marvellous opportunity of spending quite a lot of time in Ireland, and the gift of getting to know its fantastic people. Now, their unique brand of humour and the sideways view that the Irish have on life has given me a huge fund of stories to tell. The very first time I ever went to Ireland, I was at Heathrow Airport to fly to Dublin. I was in the queue for the Aer Lingus check-in when a man in front of me turned round and said, "I wish I brought me piano." So I said to him, "Why?" He said, "I left me tickets on it." Now, when I got to Dublin, I was invited to go down and visit a very good friend of mine called Ted Corcoran. Does anybody know Ted Corcoran? Anybody know Ted? He's a former international president of Toastmasters International. And he comes from a very small village in County Kerry, way down in the southwest. He invited me down. He said, get the train from Dublin. It's about 3 hours. When you arrive at the station, walk into the village, come into the pub, and I'll be there. So I got the train. It arrived in the station 3 hours later in the dead of night. I got out to find it was 10 miles to the village. No taxis, no street lights. I wandered through that countryside for hours, and eventually I found the village. I found the pub, and I found Ted. And I said to him, Ted, that is an awful long way from the station to the village. And he said, so it is, Michael, so it is. I said, well, why didn't they put the station in the village? He said, they thought about it, but they decided it'd be better by the railway line. Cannot fault logic like that. The next day, Ted and I went to Kinsale. And Kinsale is a beautiful fishing village right in the south, just about half an hour south of Cork. And we checked into our little B&B, which was a pub, and the landlady said, would you like a paper in the morning? And I said, yes, please. She said, would you like today's or yesterday's? I said, I'd like today's, please. She said, well, you'll have to wait till tomorrow. And then we came down to the bar, and it was about 3 in the afternoon. So I said to the barman, when's opening time? And the barman said, it'll be 5 o'clock. Would you like a drink while you're waiting? Now, truly, I could go on all night long. My point is simple, is humour is the great relaxant. It relaxes the audience, and if the audience is relaxed, you, the speaker, will be relaxed. It's a virtuous circle. There are very, very few speeches, including eulogies, which wouldn't benefit from a touch of humour. I personally try and get a laugh within the first 30 seconds of almost every speech I do. Now, who's going to come to the Robin's workshop after this? All of you, I hope. Because he's going to tell you how to use humour, and it's going to be very entertaining. Actually, I thought originally that I was after him, but I was told he was a very hard act to follow. Somebody said he couldn't follow a word he said. Very common. So, he'll tell you how to use humour. My message is use it. Use it whenever you can. Let's go back to our experiment. It's the turn of volunteer number 4. Now, just for 30 seconds, I'm going to ask you, as best you can, to play back to your group what you heard your volunteer number 1 say. Okay? Just for half a minute. Whatever you remember your volunteer number 1 said, and I suggest you don't roll around on the floor. Oh, go on then. Go on. You might need to borrow a jacket. So just play back for 30 seconds what you heard volunteer number 1 say. Volunteer number 4, please.
Welcome everyone. My favourite hobby is ice skating. Ice skating is great because you get to do all sorts of moves without your hands. First of all, some of the moves involve falling on your ass. So then you have to get up.
volunteer number 5, your job, just for 15 seconds, is to play back as best you can what you saw volunteer number 2 do. Got me? Okay, off you go. Just 15 seconds, what you saw her do. Him.
When I can't find it, I drive the car like a madman. All around the track, but I thoroughly enjoy it.
Has every group got 6? Are there any extra ones in any of the groups? You got 5, okay. All right. Well, you'll have to fight out who's going to be volunteer number 6, okay. And the group with more, if you want to split this assignment between number 6 and number 7, so you're going to speak for about 40 seconds, so 20 seconds each. So give a little tinkle at 20, a big tinkle at 40, and the last volunteer is going to play back as best they can what they heard and saw volunteer number 3 do. These were the words and gestures. Off you go.
Do you want to split them?
Split to 20.
But how can we show them? What gives this thing to sound? I love listening to sound.
What else did you say? Take it with me.
How are we doing for time overall? What's the... Where are we now? Wow, that's fantastic. I said 31. Okay. All right, we've got a little bit of time. I just want you to take, say, 4 minutes, just to talk amongst yourselves, not to do an evaluation, but particularly in relation to the last 3 people, is what did you observe about that exercise and about how they played back what the first 3? Just talk amongst yourselves for 4 minutes. If you time that for, we'll call it 3 minutes. I'll do your deal on 3 minutes. Okay.
Sorry, then I've got the side
So you just
I think it depends on the
Oh, yeah, I would think
Well, I mean, try to make it one day, take a video and then play it back. Yeah, if you do a 7 minute speech, play it back 3 minutes.
I'd like to make a woman sprawling on
more style. Just a tad. I've had more experiences. I feel graceful. That's why I asked. Do you play ice? You want to start each time?
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Now we've got a few minutes left, so we're getting near the end. And I thought I'd just take a couple of minutes just to explain how I happen to be here this evening doing this. I was at home one evening playing with my train set, and there was a knock at the front door, and my wife, that's my beautiful assistant over there, my future ex-wife, she answered the door and she called through. She said, "It's a telephone call for you." So I went to the call box at the end of the street, times are hard, and it was Graham Kettle. And he said, "Mike, I'd like you to come to the pub, meet me at the pub, I'll buy you a drink, and I've got something to talk to you about." Now the reason I'm explaining this is because I'm obviously at the end of a long list of distinguished refusals. Anyway, we sat there in the pub, taking alternate sips of a glass of water. I told you times are hard. And Graham told me about this workshop, communication workshop, and that they needed a speaker. Well, after a lot of begging and grovelling and pleading, he finally agreed to let me do it. And I hope that through my stories and by example, I've shown you what I believe to be the 4 key success factors that make for good communication. They are the power of gestures and the real importance of making sure our words and our gestures are in harmony. They are being aware of the impact and the differing impact we can have on people in our audience. The crucial importance of knowing your audience, and finally, why you should use humour at every available opportunity. Now, I'd like to leave you with a statement. Now, many teachers and trainers will tell you that this is a myth, but I believe it to be true, and you can decide for yourself, and this is the reason we did this experiment. It's said that people remember 10% of what they hear, 20% of what they see, and 50% of what they hear and see. No, that's rubbish. That is rubbish. Not the statement. I believe it to be true, and if you think about the experiment, you can make up your own minds. What was rubbish was the way I expressed it, I communicated it. What I should have said was, people remember this much of what they hear, this much of what they see, and this much of what they hear and see. Is that true? Thank you all.
I haven't got a mic, but it doesn't matter. Thank you very much, Mike, for such an entertaining presentation to us this evening. It's just a fantastic way to start the weekend. And you've certainly demonstrated to us the use of gestures, the use of humour, and the impact that you can have on your words and the gestures that you make. And knowing your audience, you've known your audience so well that we've all been cracking up laughing the whole evening. It's just been fantastic, and it's lovely to have the interaction so that we're doing as well as seeing and listening. So I'd like to present John O'Leary, who would like to give you a gift.
Thank you, everybody. Did you enjoy it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Did you learn something?
Yes.
Did you enjoy his humour?
Yes.
Would you like him back?
Yes.
Michael, come on the stage, please. Presentation. I would like to present you with a little gift and a little card. And look at the camera, because we're both looking good Irishmen.
I knew you'd appreciate it.
Yes, very much. And thank you. Thank you.
Nobody's told us to.